Hi guys, welcome back to the Department of Filtration. Today we're going to be having a look at the Bareco CR532 wheel filter. Bareco is an Australian tractor parts brand. They make pretty cheap stuff, but they make a lot of stuff for a whole lot of different brands, mainly focus on sort of the older tractors. So on the box is pretty basic, just a blue box with their sticker, spin-on filter, Massey Ferguson Ford International Fiat. Got a mix of genuine and other brand part numbers. It's like 3 Wix ones on there. Fram, Bareco, Baldwin, Fleetguard, looks like a Ford, Chamberlain, International, and Massey. So there's a few different ones there. It was wrapped up, but this one has had the plastic open. There's nothing special there. So it comes wrapped in plastic. That's a good start. Nice and sealed up. This particular one is an equivalent to a LF701 that we took a look at in one of our last videos, and I've got that here for comparison purposes, so we'll have a look at them together later. In terms of the cans, painted with a painted logo, it's a part number, nothing else. It's a date code. Oh wait, 10, not sure how the way the date code works. It looks, this box is 2008. It's 810. Anyway, made in PRC, which is a fancy way of saying made in China, People's Republic of China. Yeah, I contacted Bareco and asked them, because they're not necessarily like a huge company, and I don't necessarily have a huge lineup of filters as well, like this. For other companies, they would make, maybe 3 or 4 filters that would replace this one. But they make one that fits, they say it fits a whole heap, which can most of the time be pretty dodgy, but we're having a look at this today. I contacted Bareco to ask them who makes their filters for them, or if they're just made in a factory in China for Bareco, or some other company makes them and they rebrand them, and I didn't actually get a reply out of them, which is a bit strange because they're normally pretty good with their customer service. They're right on it. So in terms of gasket, sitting up above there, in there pretty well, and it's thick. It feels like pretty cheap rubber. Fairly hard compared to flexible, but it does sit in there. And to give you an idea, this is a cheap filter, so this is like $9 or something. So compared to OEM or something, it's cheap, but compared to Fleetguard, it's about on par. So this is a good comparison in terms of price point. What you see there, this thing is sort of... Anyway, we'll get this cut open and see what we've got. Alright guys, I'm going to cut open and see what we got. So, in terms of base plate, it is a nice, decent sized base plate. 5 threads in there, that's good. Seem to be cut not bad. and holes, you know, about standard, good for what it is. I'll just leave it there. We'll compare it to the other one at the end. Now this is one that has a standpipe the same as our LF701. So just that there. It's got our little tabs on the inside there that locate it on the nipple. The gasket doesn't locate itself. That is very, very thin gasket. Now I'm just going to compare these to this while I'm going actually, so it's just a Fleetguard base plate on the right. It's got a lot more holes, bigger holes. Gaskets are about the same. This valve, it's hard. I'll have to show you how thin it is. It's got little supporting things, which is alright, but this is the one off the Fleetguard. Give you an idea of the thickness. And the thick part there, so that's a bit over, just about 2 mil. Pretty much exactly 2 mil that there, thick. And it's nice and solid, this here. And that's just coming down around 0.9. So this is what I would think like acceptable. Like there's a lot of ones that are thicker out there, but this is good for what it is. This thing is just so thin, I doubt that it would bounce back into shape very long and really push against there and hold the oil in. So instead of forming nicely to the thing, it just bends when you put pressure on it. Right, and in terms of the standpipe, this is quite worrying down here, if you guys can see that. All this crap is on the output side of the filter. Just run a finger in and around. There's a whole heap of dust down in there. And this very badly cut edge. It's like it was cut with a hacksaw and then just left and not even cleaned up. The other end's okay, but still got a bit around here. Very dirty. As soon as you put that on your engine, if you see, all that stuff is going to go through your engine. You can see all that dirt. I didn't put that there, that was there. And the filter was open just a few minutes ago. In terms of sealing on there, valve would do a pretty good job of sealing on top of the ring, so when that goes on there, you shouldn't have an issue sealing against that surface, as long as it's so I can have an issue sealing on that surface. One problem I do have here with the standpipe, I'll show you the Fleetguard one here first to give you an example of one that's designed well. So this has got an edge and it's got these things that help locate it, but the valve comes right down to the bottom, right? So when this edge has got a recess that sits in top of that there, so you can see when it's in there it's flat, which means when we put all this together, and this is under good coil spring pressure, that valve, it actually seals down in that gap. If I can get it to look at it. So between the valve and here, which means the valve and the top of the housing is sealed. Now if you look at this Bareco one, let me look at the element. See how that just sits flat on top of there. And then this valve just sits on there. There's no way that under pressure that is actually going to, this is not going to seal against there. So you'll just have oil coming in your inlet and then straight past there, straight past your media into your engine completely unfiltered. So at first glance you'd be happy to see that this filter has a standpipe because it helps the oil stay in the filter and prevent bad starts with no oil. But in actual fact, this standpipe is this filter's downfall, because they've just taken a standard old filter cartridge, it's probably in 10 of the other Bareco filters, and then whacked this on there, and it's not designed properly and it's not going to seal when you're going to be getting unfiltered oil straight away, let alone how dirty this filth is and all this going into the engine. We'll move on to the can. It's good that it's got a coil spring. It doesn't have a whole lot of tension. If we compare this to the Fleetguard, it's about 2.5. It's like 2.9. This has got a lot more. And the other difference is these ends are the weak point. The ends are the weak point. You can see here they're really easy to bend. So if I just put pressure on that, it bends down past the edge real easy. But the Fleetguard one's designed well, where it sits on top of the next one, so that's hard to depress, whereas this is all sort of flimsy. Now if I just push on the edges, the whole thing sort of deforms, goes past itself. The concept's there, but the quality and the thought in the design is just not. The can itself though, that's where a lot of the time I find these manufacturers trick you. So this is the Fleetguard one. We try and measure that on a nice edge again. About 0.8, 0.9. So that's a heavy duty can, as you'd expect from a big diesel filter. This one here, feel it when you pick it up, weighs an absolute ton. And the thickness, so it's like 1.1. It's very I can't even bend it. So you pick that up and you go, geez, that's a good filter, that's a nice solid can. You can see the standpipe in there, but the rest of it's a bit dodgy. This is a bit interesting, how it steps down and then it's got the fluted end. but the can's alright. As I said, coil spring. Coil spring's too big for its hole, so you can see that. You see the spring. It doesn't fit in there, so it'd be very easy to knock that filter and for it to come off center because the spring can't sit in this little groove. In terms of the cartridge itself, it actually looks pretty good. We got our metal end caps, little locating tabs, which at the same time is a little bit disappointing. When you see locating tabs, you can see, yeah, they're trying to make it sit in the can properly, but at the same time, you know, they could have made a bigger element to fit in there. Much bigger. You can see how much space is at the top of that compared to Fleetguard one. You know, sits in there nice with no tabs and there's only a little bit of room. I've got a coil spring bypass valve, which is good. It's center core with levers, crimp center seam. It's nice, very clean element. We'll cut the paper out and see what we're looking at. Alright, so I got the media cut out. It's just very basic cellulose. It looks like a lot of the cheaper ones that we get here, not very pliable, quite hard. But in terms of length, it's about 2.5, and the Fleetguard in this filter is 2.9. And in terms of difference in height, this Bareco one it's about 95. The Fleetguard's definitely 100, and you can see that in the canisters. There's a height difference there, and this one's also got a much wider centre core, so you're going to fit less depth in there in terms of the pleats. So it's got less there, a fair bit, considerably less media than what you'll find in the Fleetguard. But we'll have a look at this under the microscope, see what we're looking at. Right, so that's our media under the microscope, and it actually looks pretty decent. There's some fine fibres in there, and it looks pretty decently packed. So the media quality itself is not too bad, but like I said, in terms of pliable, I think this would be quite fragile compared to the Fleetguard. Moving on from the media, we'll have another look at the core. So we're comparing it to this one, obviously, and it's good center. We're gonna good center tube. Just gonna measure the thickness of the metal in this. It's right at about 0.2 or 3 mil. Find a spot on a Fleetguard. You know, it's clearly about 0.5. So this is a lot more dense, heavier. You know, it's a lot more robust. This, yeah, it's got the right idea, but like when I was cutting that with Stanley knife, I bent that edge. That was real easy. You know, and in terms of oil flow, yeah, these are going to be about the same, I think. The levers might be a little bit more open on here. So what's the final verdict? We'll bring these two together. So overall, the design of this filter is a good design. Like, they've got the basics down. The idea's there, but necessarily the quality is lacking a bit. It's a lot like the super cheap auto filter in terms of it's there, but there's half as much metal in this as there is in this, you know. This thing is super thin. The spring's not designed very well. Like, I'd pick this over, you know, this spring's still better than a leaf spring, but it's not as good as this, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not necessarily bad, but it's not as good as something that's in the same price range. The main killer of this, the main Achilles heel of this filter is the sealing of the standpipe. As I said before, this one here, the design of it and the recess in the head lets that sit down and seal. This sits there, lets your oil go past any day, all day. And this brings to our attention one of the biggest problems that we tend to have with brands like this that make one filter is, say, it fits a whole lot of things, and they also don't necessarily have a very big lineup. Like, you know, people like Fleetguard, Donaldson, they just have a huge lineup. Like, you know, they make thousands and thousands of different filters. And then there's the OEM, which, you know, makes exactly what the thing was designed for. And most of the time, these guys, like Donaldson, will make another filter that actually suits that application rather than saying, oh yeah, this one will be right, it'll do the job. And it custom designs the elements to actually work. Like they said, we need a filter this size with a standpipe. They didn't just go take whatever the closest size thing we already make and just chuck it in there and it'll be right. They made one that works with this and it does a good job and you can trust it. Whereas on this side of the equation, they've gone, oh, we need a filter with a standpipe in it to make this specification. And what they've done is they've just gone and got a cartridge out of a similar size filter that they make. They probably make, you know, Bareco probably make 50 filters, you know, and maybe 20 of them have got this exact same cartridge. You wouldn't know unless we looked at them. And that's also one of the reasons why it's so loose in there, you know. This element is not designed specifically for this can like that is. That's a nice fit. That is made for that can. This is one that's just been whacked in there to fit so it'll be right. And then they've done the exact same thing with this. They've just taken a standard element, whacked that in there, go, ta-da, it's got a standpipe. Whereas in reality, this is what's killing this filter, because there's no sealing, there's no proper way that it sits on there, it's loose, and that's its biggest downfall. So that's the main reason why a lot of times I would watch out for brands that are small, don't have a huge lineup, that sort of thing of filters. I'm not saying that they're all bad, but a lot of the time you're going to see stuff like this, where they're sort of just all bits together. They only really make 5 of these things, and out of their 50 little fine up, they just make them fit. So in the same price range, there's no question that this Fleetguard is a better filter. It's just good all around, and this is just bits together It just doesn't really work. So there you go. There is the Bareco CR532 filter.